Christian, let
Good evening. I call to order the Board of Education meeting for Prospect Heights School District 23 for Thursday, August 10th, 2023 at 7:01 p.m. All right.
roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bednar?
Present.
Mr. Gradanis?
Present.
Mrs. McClaney?
Present.
Mr. Nordmark?
Present.
Mrs. Peters?
Present.
Mrs. Botwinski?
Present.
Mr. Novak?
Present. Okay. All right. Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for starting that, Becky, because I was waiting for the children to
The child to get it.
Somebody else always kicks
There's
us off.
one here.
Right?
Board member.
I'm like, who started?
I just went for it.
Really
Just went for
fun.
it.
All right. Recognition of visitors and participation at each regular.
Yeah.
What's that?
take a number.
I have to take a number?
No.
Yeah, there's so many people.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, did I miss something? I'm like,
No
I
comment.
don't see take a number here. At each regular and special open meeting, members of the public and district employees may comment on or ask questions of the Board of Education. If you would like to address the board, please complete the form and give it to Ms. O'Donnell, our recording secretary. Or I guess submit one online, right? I mean, is there any way to do that?
No, not any longer, now that we're back live in
I didn't
person.
even think
You
you
could do it
could do that.
online.
All right. Given that we have no one in the audience other than our esteemed technology team, I would say we'll move on. Let's move on to communications.
So communications, as we were speaking prior to the meeting, we want to wish a happy birthday to our friend Amy. And congratulations to Dr. Curtis in his first official meeting as our new assistant sup for teaching and learning. The Family Fest flyer has been distributed. It'll be very visible. We want everybody to save the date. Circle September the 8th from 4 until 7 p.m. for our District 23 Family Fest. Planning has been underway now for a couple of months. We are going to do food and games and fun and music and more. So September the 8th, 4 till 7, right here at our main campus.
Birthday cake?
Maybe a birthday.
Well, whose birthday is it?
That night it's my birthday, actually.
Oh, wow.
No place I'd rather spend it
You're welcome, Amy.
than in a bouncy house and in a slide and.
Of course.
It's like
yeah.
a giant birthday party. It's like
It's
a
almost
ice
like
cream.
someone planned it that way.
You know what I'm most excited about? We have giant tricycles
No.
and a tricycle race kind of a setup.
Really?
Is this
Yes.
like your birthday party?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or can you invite
We
all
may
your
just
friends?
all night do a can you beat the superintendent race, and I just will never get off. But I'm guessing the answer is yes, they can.
He's going to be out sick the whole next week. He's going to have a great time as his birthday party.
So that planning is underway. We look forward to having folks participate. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Anything else? All right. Let's move on to committee reports. Building and sites, and I will do an update, and Carol compliment me if I'm missing anything, please. We met on 8/3, was the last time we met. We talked about the controllers still kind of being outstanding because they come from Romania apparently, and just they have not gotten here. So and I don't know if I don't want to steal any thunder. So is there anything you want to cover on that, Amy? Or?
No,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, we discussed that we will move away from kind of using those right now. We'll get a refund for what we had done, and they're going to switch back to the controllers that we had. They're outdated, but still work, and won't result in any problems or deficiencies within the system. So, and then we're also getting an extra stock in case those fail for any reason. So we'll actually have some in stock. Does that reflect that?
Yeah.
Good. Let's see. The graphical interface for the technology system, the system that kind of is going to help control that system, won't be done till third or fourth quarter. Again, it doesn't impact anything. It's more just for users' ease of use. Sullivan Plumbing has made amazing headway. We're able to see that. It was weird to see one classroom with just like concrete and a strip down the middle. But it sounds
Yeah,
like
totally done. Yeah,
everything's done.
totally
That's awesome.
done and
That's
tiled.
awesome.
And, yep.
That I got the amount of work that was
Yeah.
done. I mean, it was crazy walking down the hall and just seeing
Mhm.
so much what was torn up and then put right back. So
Yep.
great work. And I think they we're not going to have tiles for a while, right? Right now it's still carpeting.
It's carpeting just
Carpet
in the
squares?
hallway.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And anyway, so if you walk down there and notice it's carpeting, that's temporary, at least until we get replacement tiles. Whiteboards hung, projectors hung, and done, right?
Done.
Yeah.
Whiteboard projectors, that's all done. Ike fencing, wow, it's probably done too now.
Done now.
It's
Wow.
really good.
It's really
It
good.
looks
Does
nice.
it? I have to
Yes.
go over there. They were all the fencing, which was
Yeah.
amazing amount of fencing that was going to go up. So it was cool
Yeah.
to see. It was actually kind of nice to see it before,
Yeah.
so I could go there now and see how cool the change it is. And I assume then the Ross Gate also is done.
It's on back order.
Oh,
We're waiting for the
okay.
some specific.
The one, of course, that I assumed.
Green.
All right, so,
Yeah.
all right, so the
A little
Ross
bit
Gate,
longer.
to
Yep.
be decided. Safety and security signage, hopefully went up as well as
The park signage will be up next week.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Before school starts. Ground signs, again, before school starts. Window siding doors, putting out the bid in October for Board of Ed approval in November. Is that still aligned?
We'll talk about that a
Okay.
little bit more
Okay,
too in
cool.
September.
All right, super. And then, and then we briefly talked about Cook County, or Illinois. So, well, I'll let you cover those things.
Yeah.
But that's all I had. Carol, was there anything I missed?
I don't think so. The walkthrough was just fantastic.
It
I mean,
was.
everything looks new and shiny and clean, and the new stuff. The mural at Mac is really, that's a cool.
Yeah.
Everything. looks
Yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome. You have to check out the new mural. All right.
Where's that?
Library.
Oh, it's in the library. I gotcha.
It
Yeah, it was
was.
designed
You
by
would
a
never know that
Kaylee
thing
Cho.
was
Uh-huh.
like a sticker.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sticker, decal, whatever you want to call it. But it looked really awesome. Just blended. All right, moving on. Finance. Mary?
We met last Monday, the 31st, and we really had two main topics that we discussed. The first was the budget we went through. I think we had a lot of good questions. I think we dug pretty deep in it. Thank you for adding actuals and such in there for this year, so that was good. And we'll be discussing that obviously more upcoming. We discussed registration fees that have been paid so far. It doesn't look like we're getting an update on that. It's only been a week and a half since. But I guess the one thing I heard out of that, I think the biggest thing, which made me feel better because we know some people don't like to pay fees, but they pretty much all come around by the time it's time for graduation and they can't participate. So
Right.
one way or another, we get
It's
them.
like the IRS.
Yeah, right. exactly. So that's all I really have unless Brian, you have anything else to add?
No, that's good, thanks.
Awesome. NSSEO, Carol.
I was at the NSSEO meeting last week. It was the first meeting with Meg Schnorr as the superintendent. And the new board officers. It started out, Meg acknowledged and thanked Anna Klimkowitz, who was the outgoing, she's still an officer, but she is not president anymore, but she served 2 terms for NSSEO, and she was president of her own board, and so we kind of acknowledged that. Meg did a presentation of her kind of first 100 days, just kind of reviewed the activity that she's been doing leading up to her start date, the time, you know, some of the activities she's done with Judy, visiting different programs, getting to know the program directors and principals and admin staff, and was at some of the graduations just to kind of get an introduction to NSSEO. Then she outlined some of the activities she is planning for the coming months, and a lot of that is just meeting with the building principals, NSSEO leadership, the member district admin reps, board members, union officers, and staff, just you know, kind of getting a lay of the land, finding out what how people, kind of taking the temperature of the co-op, what people think works, what they think, you know, might need to be changed or adjusted. And then she's hoping to put together a presentation for the board towards the end of the year. So the board was pleased with her presentation, just kind of thinking that that might be kind of too aggressive of a schedule for her, but we'll see. You know, I mean, she's already pretty much into all that. So then Human Resources, Brad Carter went through the policy meeting. The policy committee had a meeting, went through about 15 policies. Half of them were you know, just 5-year update kind of things, changing dates and cross-references. The other half was, it needed some tweaking specific to NSSEO. He had a ESY report, extended school year report, in a newsletter from the Kirk ESY program. Then Business Services, Julie presented the annual accounting for building improvements. Each year, NSSEO puts together what they spend on building improvements, and then, you know, it's divided amongst the member districts. There are 2 districts that used to be part of NSSEO, 15 and 54. They still have equity in the properties. They're no longer part of the co-op. So every year she has to put together this report that shows their equity minus whatever improvements were made for their portion of the equity. So eventually that's going to be 0, I would imagine. So someone was saying, could it go negative? But we do that every year. Let's see. There was an update on the facility planning committee. They met with Archon and CS2 Design Group. And you'll remember that NSSEO decided in the spring, as kind of came out of the finance committee activity, that we needed a long-range plan for various facility needs, you know. So, because there really was no plan, it was kind of, well, this year we'll do that. So now they're putting together a plan. Archon and CS2 has reviewed all the facilities, and now they're in the process of kind of weighting what the different improvements or repairs need to be done and pricing them out. And so they will come back with some recommendations in September. And then there was a review of the grants that NSSEO received last year. It was a total, it was over $1.7 million in grants. Various organizations, small local grants, and some larger ones. They have a COPS grant for over $300,000. Other grants that are multi-year grants. Illinois Service Resource Center grant for $650,000, and a Bureau of Justice Assistance Stop School Violence grant for over $500,000. I never heard of that one, but and let's see, and then additional funds that were put in that pot from the NSSEO Foundation, and most of that comes from their Bingo Night fundraiser, which last year raised over $14,000. And the last thing was their committee assignments for the board were made and approved. And I think that's it.
What committees are you on?
Safety.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Any questions? Super. Policy. Becky.
Jim and Don and I got to meet about, Craig was there too. We got to meet about policy. It was very fun. Lots of updates to footnotes. Some of the big things that, we have the first read tonight, but some of the big things are there's some new laws about discrimination and bully prevention training. So like that weaves itself through all of the policy. Some reference changes, stuff about board member oaths and insurance, changes to license, not just certified, student discipline updates, concussion updates, student use of building updates. So just some discrimination and bullying and stuff like that. So it'll be a great first read for all of you. Any questions about any of the policies? Jim, did I forget anything?
Nope,
We had a great time.
we did. We had an absolutely great time.
As policy always is.
Yes.
But it's an amazing time.
What do you think the next one's
We
gonna be a
learned a
biggie
lot
again?
of things.
It's going to be a biggie again.
There were a whole bunch of laws that were just passed.
Oh, yeah, there
Oh,
were.
yeah.
Yes, there
So
were.
we will see the trickle down of those, but we've had a review of the legislative changes and new requirements at our admin team today. We'll be just fine.
All right, cool. Community relations. I understand there was no meeting, but Brian's going to do an update on events. Did you?
Well, it's been 2 months.
It may have been in
Yeah, it might have been
we've
late
actually
June
met.
or
I
early
feel
July.
like we did meet,
Maybe
right?
not in July.
It was
Maybe.
late June. if
Yeah, it
we
was like
met.
late June. But yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did meet.
Yeah.
We did meet before.
So I understand that they
Before the
did
parade.
meet,
Yes.
They did.
and Brian's going to
Yeah.
do an update.
Because
You
it
know
was
what,
about our parade.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean the 4th of July parade was great. Again, I think that the big takeaway we had for this was so many families bring pets there that we should be
Yes,
giving
that's
out
right.
dog
Dog
treats.
treats.
Right? That's,
Just have to be careful when you throw those in the kids' eating.
oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
There you go.
Okay, right. Well, we'll have to make sure that we plan that carefully if we do that.
What's up with that?
They're healthy. I mean,
But
that's fine.
but that's a really fun event, right? And I think, hopefully we can figure out ways to get more and more participation in it, because it's great that we're able to do it. It's not a huge time commitment, right? That's a quick walk,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
very quick.
it's over pretty quickly.
I have to say too that Craig just recently leaving Ross and having Chris there, like, the kids were so excited to see Craig and Craig, right? Like, Mr. Holmes, Mr. Curtis, Dr. Curtis, like, it was just so cool to see the kids excited. Like, I know it's in the summer and nobody wants to come back, but, like, the excitement from the kids of seeing the superheroes in their lives. So, yeah, that's pretty cool.
The business manager, not
Yeah.
I don't think
That's the food service lady. You can pass out like chicken nuggets as you go.
I yelled your name out, Amy, but you didn't hear me.
What you don't know is that Chris and I
No, I went and everybody started randomly going back.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, Amy. They didn't.
We'll get you a cake next year.
You know, and then I think in the meeting in June, we'd also kind of talked, Chris had given us a preview, Chris Alms had given us a preview of some of the changes to the website that are, that are coming. And then we do have just a really busy kind of community calendar that we just wanted to run through. The first item, which you may not even be aware of, right, which is tomorrow night, which is a kind of
PTO Kona Ice night.
There's a PTO Kona Ice night tomorrow night at Patriot Park.
Right out at Patriot Park,
Yeah, from 6 to 8. So I think that'll be really well attended. That's a great idea, right, that the PTO put together. So my guess is that they would just park in the lot out there like the ice cream truck does after school. So that's tomorrow night. Saturday, right, there's the early childhood and kindergarten play dates at Ike, which is something we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, which is really great, like for family, especially for new families to come and like to meet other parents, for the kids to meet other kids, and then the library is usually there, the park district is usually there, the different scout troops are usually there as well to kind of just a softer introduction, right, especially for new families. Institute Day at MAC is Monday. First day of school is Wednesday, the 16th. First day of early childhood is the 17th, and then first day of kindergarten is a week later, the 24th. Back to school nights, right, or the week of the 23rd. Again, as Don was saying, we talked at the beginning. The Family Fest is Friday, September 8th, and then something that I need to do some work. The golf outing is September 15th, and so I assume are you doing with your group? Okay. And then I guess if you're interested, let me know. Are you signed up already?
I've already bought a foursome.
Okay. Okay, so I mean,
behind the
those of us that got left behind, right? With
Brandon and I have foursomes already.
We can always get Pat Chester.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'll catch up with you all and see who's interested in doing it, and we should get another foursome together for the board, right?
Yeah.
Is that it starts like later?
Noon.
By, like,
Yeah.
Oh, it does start at noon?
It's noon.
Okay, so that is earlier. Okay.
It's still a 9 holes.
Afternoon, 9 hole.
9.
what is this thing? I thought
Last year we did 18.
No, it's 18.
No,
Oh, it is 18?
Yeah.
I thought so.
I kind of gave
I
up.
wouldn't
You
want
wanna
to
do
nine.
I just do a fundraiser the whole
pretty
time.
sure we
I'm
played
not-
9 holes.
Yeah, no, historically our average has been about, we get to 12 to 13 holes.
I was going to say, I usually get to about
Yeah.
12.
I think we
just throw the ball.
You're not keeping score.
Okay, so great. So we'll have great board attendance there, and then
Yeah.
I'm sure some of
Yeah.
you all will be there as well. I
Yeah.
think it's great. And then I think as we touched on earlier, the communication updates, right? That there is a new, more mobile-friendly website, right? I think that one of the designs that we talked about for a while is, which is really great, is to kind of have the high-frequency tabs really easy to get to, right? They're just kind of one click away for for things like menus, stop times, things like that, to really get the highest priority items as few clicks as possible.
Brian, we had chatted too. The infographic that Don sent out was fabulous.
Oh, the frequently asked questions.
Yes, no, it's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fabulous. I mean, even it was great to be able to see exactly what you needed. So, I don't know, for all of you that don't have kids, right before school, right before the Power School schedule release, Don sent out an infographic with 8 frequently asked questions.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
He sent it to us,
Okay,
too.
good.
I saw
Yeah,
that.
it was great.
because you all know, like as it gets closer and closer, like the buzz goes up. When do the schedules come in, right? And so that was like a nice thing to kind of send out, just to to quell all the
She was my classroom teacher, I think, was one of the
Right?
classrooms.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And then so that was it from the community relations side.
Awesome.
Was there anything else that you had, Becky?
I do not.
Okay.
It was a good meeting too.
Okay.
Lots of good stuff going on. And
All right, awesome. We also met the safety and
Safety committee met,
we talked
yes.
together, kind of just
Talk about sort of the purpose and goals and
Yeah.
frequency and.
set it up, and
Mhm.
Don kind of went over what we do already, which was a lot, and it was good to hear. So I
Yeah,
didn't know if you
July
wanted
19th.
to mention anything else about that. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on June 14th, the personnel report, and the August tuition reimbursement.
can we pull A apart from B and C, please?
All right, super. All right, so why don't we start with A and see if there's a motion for approval of item A, approval of regular minutes of June 14th.
I'll move to approve the regular meeting minutes of June 14th,
Motion by Mary
2023.
Lynn,
I'll second.
second by Bryn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bednar,
Abstain.
Mrs. Betwinsky,
Yes.
Mr. Verdanis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Abstain.
Mr. Nordmark,
Yes.
Mr. Novak,
Yes.
Mrs. Peters.
Yes.
And motion carries 5-2. 5-0-2, thank you. And then, let's see, is there a motion to approve items B and C, personnel report and August tuition reimbursement?
I move to approve the personnel report and the August tuition report. Or August tuition reimbursement report.
Super. Motion
Second.
by Marilyn and second by Carol. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bednar,
Yes.
Mrs. Betwinsky,
Yes.
Mr. Verdanis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark,
Yes.
Mr. Novak,
Yes.
Mrs. Peters.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Financial report.
Brian's had it for the past 6 months.
Yeah, I've had the bills for the last decade.
It's fun over the summer. I had it
my
last
God.
summer.
Yeah.
It's great.
I think that just the one, I don't know if you just scrolled through them, right, because there's a lot of real estate there, but I think just like the one really big set of items there was the July furniture purchases, right?
Yeah.
So there was about $120,000 in furniture purchases, which is a ballpark, right? Is about 30,000 per school,
Yeah.
right? And that was kind of the full extent, right, for this.
Yeah, we just have just a
Yeah.
few smaller projects, an office here or there, but that was easily 95% of them. Yeah,
Right.
they're just about done.
And so I think that's really it for the year for that.
Yeah.
There was nothing else that really stuck out from the rest of that. Just lots
Nothing
of
terribly
lots of end of year
Yeah.
purchases,
Yep.
lots of
Yeah.
beginning of the year
Right.
purchases, right? That there's
Some construction bills.
a lot of the
That's about
construction
it.
bills,
Yeah.
etc. So,
Well, since you
It's
had
just a
3
lot.
months of
Yeah.
3
It
months
was
of
only
Uh-huh.
2, wasn't it?
bills to review,
Yeah, it's 2.
no, it was about 7 weeks, right?
it
Wasn't
just
obviously-
shows
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah.
Because you got 8-1 in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Squeezed in.
Just
you know.
squeezed it
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Anything
Would you like to
Yeah, and so then
motion to approve?
so I motion to approve the financial reports.
All right, so motion by Brian,
I'll second.
second by Marilyn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bednar,
Yes.
Mr. Verdanis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark,
Yes.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes.
Mrs. Betwinsky,
Yes.
Mr. Novak.
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Superintendent's report.
So our first item is an action item. It is our annual, sort of within our budget cycle. This is the time where we Mr. McPartland will provide an overview of the tentative budget, and then we vote to post that in the newspaper, have a public hearing, and then we look to approve the budget in September. So Christian, if you could pull that up. Just have a couple of slides to kind of give folks the framework around the tentative budget. It's the other presentation. That's the second. There you go. Thanks. Sorry about that. It's all right.
So included in your packet this evening were just a couple of items. We had the tentative budget, which was presented and discussed at finance. We prepared that and showed that by function. So we also included the prior year budget, the year-to-date actuals, and then the proposed budget for 2024, and then along with a just brief summary. We also went through kind of the year-to-date actuals and where there were some fairly significant variances, largely due to some revenues. We ended up about $1.5 million under budget on our expenditures. However, we were under on our revenues as well. So as of our last meeting, we were potentially looking at a potential shortfall of about $698,000 is what we talked about, knowing though that significant revenue was still expected from the county. Since that meeting, we've booked $486,000 in revenue from the county and some grant reimbursements, which is great. We still are anticipating from tax year 2021 an additional $217,000, and we've got some refund recaptures just over about $250,000 that's still outstanding. So the total right now that we're showing outstanding from the county is $478,000. If that all comes through, then that would leave us with an overage of $212. So $212,000. Sorry about that. $212. No. So that would be great news for us. We are in week 3 of working with Baker Tilly to work through the modified accrual transition. That has been a significant process for the business office to undergo now. So our hope is that they will go ahead and book all this back to the fiscal 23 year. So we're kind of just waiting to see exactly how that all sifts out. We've had a number of meetings with them, and they're working on the presentation. We'll move forward and have them take a look at the budget just to make sure that we've got those 630 numbers all wrapped up. So again, we shared a copy of the tentative budget that was discussed at finance. Just a couple things. Next slide if you want, Christian. I also shared a recommendation, just kind of an overview of some of the guidelines that we talked about in March. Again, these budgets are really just estimates of projected revenues and expenditures. It's just something to keep in mind. This document that we shared does not, it includes set-asides for all the grant dollars, but they're not formally allocated. They're just set aside as placeholders. We'll allocate those as we go into the final budget as we're preparing that for you guys in September. Just some things of note when we talk about our revenues. You can go to the other one. Yeah, that's okay. No worries. Again, in the in tax year 22, we went ahead and we reduced the extension to working cash, to transportation and tort. This is year 2 that we're really trying to push the revenues into the ed fund. We know that we have some surpluses and some other funds that we need to thoughtfully spend those down. We have gotten our EBF numbers. The district is going to get an additional just under $25,000, which isn't a lot, but it's something. That puts us just under $2 million in that EBF evidence-based funding from the state.
Can I just interject?
Of course.
In terms of EBF, particularly as we have interfaced with some of our local elected officials, with the increasing mandates that continue to come down, especially in this last legislative session, when pressed on, so how do you anticipate districts will be able to afford these new mandates? The misconception among legislators is, oh, well, we invested fully in evidence-based funding. which is true. They're doing a good job of funding through this evidence-based funding model, but that evidence-based funding model is not sufficient to actually make it work, especially across the wide range of districts. So, you know, when I had a meeting with one of our legislators regarding the kindergarten, full-day kindergarten mandate, they said, "Oh, well, but you get evidence-based funding," and I said, "You get $25,000. You know, that's not
Addition.
enough.
Right.
That's not enough
Very small.
for a custodian for us, let alone." So just keeping that in mind, it's great. Don't get me wrong. And if any of our legislators are watching, we're extremely appreciative for the increased funding, because there have been years where it's been flat or even regressive. So thank you, State of Illinois, for the continued contributions. But when we hear that sort of budget projection, it's just one of those things we have to balance. And as we have conversations with legislators, it's a good thing to remind them of.
So,
Of course.
I'm just curious, what reaction do you get when you kind of clarify that?
Yeah, confusion. And again, because their action is $350 million toward evidence-based funding. So it's a big number, and they feel really good about it. And again,
And they should.
they
Yeah,
should.
I mean, it's good.
They're funding education in the state of Illinois. Thank you. But to think that that is sufficient is a disconnect between what the needs are within districts across the state. And we're in a relatively solid position compared to many other districts in the state. So,
They need to hear what the total bill is for all the schools to do it.
right,
That might
that's part of it, yeah.
put
Mhm.
aggregated to aggregate.
It's the same as when we've had conversations about, you know, any of the projects, the construction projects, the costs are just astronomical. And so we know that in our own lives, things are costing more. And so, yes, thank you, it's great to have that increase, but it's just something that we need to continue to remind them of, because there's a significant disconnect between what they think they're allocating and how it actually trickles out.
I will say though, to that point, we do want to make sure we acknowledge a grant that we received, a $100,000 grant that we've received this year from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities, which was largely due to the advocacy by Senator
Gillespie, thank you, yes.
which is terrific. So we have incorporated that into our revenues. That is meant to go towards a bondable capital project. So we will put that towards projects expended out of Fund 60 within this fiscal year. So that was just something to make sure we acknowledge that. Additionally, the one thing that we really need to be cautious of on the revenue side, again, as we all know, is tax bills have again been delayed, anticipating a November 1st distribution. So that we'll have to really pay close attention to our cash flow. We will likely be in a position to have to do some interfund transfers, just like we did last year. The good thing is, positive, is that we still have the money from the bond sale sitting in working cash. So instead of being in a position where we have to go to bond or issue bonds to help with that short-term revenue delay, we have that money available, and we can transfer that into the other accounts as needed to kind of get us through. So we've been having some conversations already with the Treasury to make sure that we don't have any issues there, and we don't anticipate having any issues. We should. It went a little bit longer last year, and it got a little bit tight. So I just want to make sure we stay on top of that, and we will. We should be just fine. Typically, I can see that the money is already being collected on the county's website through escrow and whatnot. We still pay our taxes, so it's just a matter of getting those dollars distributed. So something just to, again, bring your attention to that. On the expenditure side, obviously everything, salaries and benefits have been allocated as we reached the agreement last year with both PHEA and SEIU. we have gone ahead and reflected the staffing adjustments that we have brought to the board a couple times now. Line items for purchase services, supplies, and equipment have largely been frozen and have really been brought more in alignment with actual spends. We have reflected I would say a fairly significant savings on our expenditures when we really kind of line them up with our actuals. The largest swing, as we discussed in finance, was that of technology's budget. They are allocating some additional funding for the purchase of those access points, which is going to be a 2-year purchase, largely reimbursable with E-rate funds. So we show that on the expenditure. Unfortunately, those E-rate dollars are going to come forward in fiscal 25. We've held the line on the cost per pupil allocation for the past probably 4 years, so we have not shown an increase there. Again, we had the additional board allocation for the $50,000 for furniture, as well as then the portion coming out of that per pupil allocation on the building side. We have gone ahead and reflected the numbers presented by NSSEO, those anticipated projections, as well as Dr. Soroka has set aside some funds kind of in case there should be a potential need for additional services to be allocated. We want to make sure we budget some additional funds for that. And then lastly, we have reflected the increase in transportation at 9.9%, which was our increase this year. So that was reflected in the Transportation Fund 40. So this current tentative budget reflects an anticipated surplus of just over $400,000. We are going to work on tightening up some numbers as well as allocating the grant dollars. Motion tonight is for placing the tentative budget on display and then approve the date and the time of the public hearing. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Just we did in that comparison, the tentative budget reflects a decrease in spend on the expenditure side of 1.2% over last year. And again, we've worked really hard to kind of tighten up some of those numbers. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question. I think, if I'm not mistaken, last year the county also said it was going to be like October,
Yes.
November, and it went longer.
It was December.
We're comfortable if it goes just as long?
I'm comfortable if it goes just as long. It does get tight.
Yeah.
It felt like last year, if I was going to compare the two, it felt like last year it was a lot of oh, it's going to be August. No, it's going to be September.
That's
Now
what
it's
I'm
going to be, it was
reacting
like
to, yeah.
every time we looked, it was kicked out another month. This has been pretty consistently November, and so that November is okay for us. November is fine, and typically what happens is those tax bills get issued, and then within a few weeks we have at least the escrow revenue coming in, and as soon as that starts to flip over, it's manageable. Again, in this past fiscal year, we really waited until that revenue came in before we shifted that money back to the other funds. We kind of worked through the Treasury and with our auditor on that to make sure we're in a good spot. So yeah, it should be just fine. Thank you for asking.
You mentioned that expenditures are reduced by 1.2% for this year over last year's expenditures.
Yes.
And we were under last year's expenditures by 1.5 million. So how does our reduction compare to, we didn't spend 1.5 in this past year.
Right.
So I'm curious as to how much is that 1.2%
Mm-hmm.
of the budget, I guess, compared to that 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about it later, but I'm just curious from a numbers perspective, like what, because so that just, when you said the 1.2, I was just trying to understand how much of that 1.5 that is or whatever. So.
Is that calculated already, or can we calculate it and get back to Jim?
I can calculate and get back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's 2 million, roughly, right? 1.2% of 22 million, something like that. Because we're only talking ed fund.
Ed fund.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks.
I'm sorry, just the upper right cell there where it says fund balances
Yes.
as of should that say 24? And then the still being finalized by treasurer?
Yeah.
That's not a place.
Should, I'm sorry, to help me
No,
understand
no,
the question.
it's
That is
correct. The
correct.
fund balances as of,
June
this
30
past
of
June.
2023. So that was the fund balances. They had not yet been
That was the balance.
finalized by
June.
that was
Okay, so that is the old stuff, so that's not what we're anticipating.
No,
no,
that's
no,
not-
no. That is just what
Okay.
is just passed. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So just to clarify, as we go into September, we'll finalize this. We've talked in finance about sharing some different reports, and so I'm working on that to share. I'll have those numbers kind of finalized a little bit closer with the auditor, and then we'll be able to share a little bit more detail in September with the final budget.
And so the anticipated fund balances in June 2024 are effectively, right, the sum of the two final columns, right? So the current
The
fund balance
424,
plus,
right, plus
the
that's correct.
anticipated net
That's
from
correct,
the next
right.
school year.
Yep.
Okay.
So the nice thing is when we look at this, just to kind of make one more point, when we think about kind of where our expendable cash is, the only fund, we really cannot move capital projects. We can do some shifts in the other operating funds, so that gives us a little bit of flexibility. Certainly you can see the bond proceeds sitting in working cash, so that will be a huge help as we kind of tighten up anticipating the county revenue coming in a little bit later.
and the date and time of our next meeting,
Oh,
of
sorry.
our
Sorry.
meeting will
Next
be
slide.
September 14th.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was on there.
Oh, is it on there already?
Yeah.
Oh, see, there you go.
Sorry.
Right, okay.
So these are just the next steps. Obviously, everything will take place at the meeting on 9/14. We'll conduct a public hearing and then approve the final budget.
And we're looking to finalize the location. We are reaching out to the artist from MacArthur, who's a former MacArthur student who created the mural. We're inviting her back to have her sign the mural. So we'd like to have the meeting at MacArthur. It'd be kind of cool to have it there in front of it. And we obviously need to have that location posted in the newspaper. So right now that's the goal. And if it's not there or we're not able because her schedule doesn't allow, we'll continue meeting it.
Super. Alright, if there are no objections, do we have a motion for approval of the fiscal 24 tentative budget?
Motion approval of the posting of the
To post, yes, so,
to post the 2024 tentative budget.
yes.
I'll second.
Motion by Brian, seconded by Mary. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bednar,
Yes.
Mr. Grodanis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark,
Yes.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes.
Mrs. Butwinski,
Yes.
Mr. Novak.
Yes. Motion passed 7-0.
Now a presentation on facilities and funding. We're presenting for tonight the board's consideration and asking for direction as we try to navigate some of the things we've just been talking about. We know that we have a pretty good handle on our current fixed projected revenue and expenditures. We have, as you all know, historically, we continue to live within those parameters and prioritize our facility enhancements, replacement. But we also know that there are additional needs, including additional mandates that we need to look at planning for long term. So we're sort of thinking about this in terms of parallel paths or two tracks. One being continuing to do our due diligence in prioritizing and using our existing funding and available grant dollars to address as much of our security, safety, and maintenance needs as we can. And at the same time, we need to continue our conversation around how do we plan long-term for solutions that support district programming needs and facility upgrade needs. So thinking about this in terms of two parallel paths. We recognize that we had an unsuccessful referendum in April, and that during that process we identified safety priorities and maintenance needs, and as needed to happen. Some of the maintenance projects that we'll be looking at, including the windows and siding project, we need to address that because of the risk for infrastructure damage. So we've got some of those intermediate, short-term, and long-term. As I mentioned in the legal update that we heard, full-day kindergarten is currently in its current version of the bill that the governor did sign is now required by school districts in the state of Illinois to operate beginning in September of 2027. There is some language in the current legislation that the state will provide some grant funding, but the way that they have thus far advertised that is through that same evidence-based funding tier model. And so the available funds will go to tier 1 school districts first, then to tier 2, and then to tier 3 and to 4 based on what's left. We are a tier 3 district, so the amount that they've been discussing thus far we're not really comfortable or confident that it's going to actually stretch into tier 3. So that's something that's yet to be discussed, something obviously that we'll be taking a serious consideration, a serious look at.
Don,
Mm-hmm.
a real quick question. Have they been clear about, like, can it be a charge for full-day kindergarten or a free full-day, or have they not laid any of that out yet?
The current legislation does not say it can be a fee.
Okay.
Having said that, the first phase of this new legislation is a steering investigative task force that is going to take the concept that was presented in the bill and try to flush out some of those questions. So there's a lot of guidance that is yet to be delivered. There are some opportunities for districts to apply for waivers and extend that 2027 date to right now in the legislation up to 2030. But that again is currently based on some of the funding, so we might not have that capacity.
Does it also require to still offer a half-day program?
You do still have to offer a half-day program. We would have to do that regardless of this new legislation.
Okay, I just
But
didn't
it,
know
yeah,
if
but
it
it's
was.
still required. You'd still offer that.
And it's, part of the issue that 80% of the schools in the school districts in Illinois already offer this. So
Right.
if it's a pure, like the evidence-based funding model would, like it doesn't seem right to fit squarely into that, right? Because my guess is that a lot of tier 1 and the vast majority of tier 1 and tier 2 schools actually already offer this. And I guess what is the funding that would be made available? Like,
There hasn't been much. They have not talked about a dollar amount yet, although what we've heard is not really all that significant anyway.
okay.
Particularly because, and again, don't get me wrong, legislators, we would love to have grant funding for the construction side of things. That would be a significant help, but it doesn't necessarily help the long-term operational costs of adding the programs. So the current conversations around, yes, there may be some funding available to assist communities that have passed referendums to support construction costs, one-time construction costs. That would be great, but that in and of itself still leaves us short of operational costs. And I think that the other component of that, as you mentioned, it isn't necessarily correlated to tiers as to who's offering and isn't offering, but there is a significant regional gap. As the board well knows, we're one of the few districts in the northern region of the state that don't offer a full-day kindergarten. But further in central and western Illinois and southern Illinois, there are significant variances in offering full-day K.
Can we go back to the question of Becky?
Sure.
I didn't understand
Oh,
the answer. No.
Oh.
Because you asked about half-day kindergarten?
Yeah.
So right now, if you offer full-day kindergarten, you have to offer an option for parents to opt back to half-day.
Correct.
So I didn't know
So
if,
the state's sort of saying you have to have full day,
Yes.
but parents
have
can
to
still
offer.
choose half-day.
so that's like an oxymoron to me.
Yes.
I mean, sorry. I mean, because I'm
Yes.
sitting there going, because then we're good. We have full day
Yeah.
and we have half day. So, but they're saying that you have to be able to fill everybody in full day.
You
So
have
you
to
have to
offer
have
full day
So
to
you have
everyone.
to have extra more space because you're going to plan for full day, but then you may not use everybody full day.
Well, the half day, so what it doesn't specify is what that half day has to look like. So you offer a full day program, you may have language arts activities in the morning, and then you may have some math activities in the afternoon. If a parent opts for a half day program, they participate in that full day for only part of the day. So again, that's a choice, but it's
Okay.
it's not from our perspective
Yeah,
educationally. They're only getting language arts or math in that example.
Right.
So again,
So
not
I'd go for the art.
not a great right.
You want to come for art, PE, and music.
Right, art,
Exactly.
and
Not
lunch.
the- not the- and lunch.
And lunch.
And not the
And
other.
you can
Exactly.
rotate based on the days of what my meeting schedule is.
Yeah.
It'll be. I'll drop my kid off when it's easy.
Exactly.
The other component, again, we've talked about in our long-range financial planning is we currently have, as Amy just shared, our last bond proceeds in our working cash. We don't have another opportunity to go back for additional bonding until at the earliest right now is the fall of 2025. So again, living within our means, as we have been for the last few decades, we need to prioritize, we need to make smart choices, but we tend to see projects like our HVAC take 4 or 5 years. Projects like our projector replacement finally wrapping up after 3 years. Our library and furniture replacements. So we prioritize every year, we're able to take a bite out of the apple and move forward a bit, but it prolongs the implementation of those needs. Obviously, none of those are programmatic. And what it ends up where it really ends up hurting us is that to do that project will continue to grow in cost. So even if you keep the scope of that project tight, the same number of Univent items are going to cost us even more the following year and even more the following year. So that's the catch that we're in. We have our need that's identified. How do we address the needs that are growing with limited funding, knowing that prices increase?
In 2025, what kind of bonds do we have available to
Just
do?
under 2 million,
Just over.
or just over 2 million.
Just
Sorry.
over.
Yeah, so we could maybe get the walkway done to one of the additional facilities.
Yes, I mean that in and of itself would not give us enough.
I figured it was low, but
Yeah.
I just wanted you to say it out loud.
Yeah.
That's all.
It's
I didn't want to rub it in.
roughly
Well, it's-
$2.3 million.
It's coming up in a bit. We'll point it out. As the community and board is aware, we looked at our community priorities and district needs. We identified these 4. They all continue to remain priorities for us. Christian, if you go to the next slide. But we want to make it really clear as folks in the community see some of the work that's being done, that they understand how we're able to get that work done after having asked for a referendum that was not successful, and understand it within the context of the greater need that does still exist. So you'll see, as was mentioned in our facilities, we updated some new fencing, some new signage, we've increased training, we've done some maintenance work. We're looking this fall to work on exterior and interior security camera replacements. We are hopeful to also receive the COPS grant that we've applied for. But those are things that we had to prioritize based on the need that's identified, and we've done as much of that as we can within our current funding. Where we still have continued need in the area of safety, the Eisenhower parking lot expansion, we're gonna reroute traffic, but that'll be better, but still not the long-term solution. Expanding security camera coverage, trying to do that in a shorter window of time rather than multiple phases, and similarly door hardware is not something that we're able to include at this time.
Are we gonna keep reusing this presentation as we go down?
Not necessarily, no, this was just for our,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Oh, was there? Did I spell something?
Right, yeah, that's, I was gonna have you fix
That's
a
right.
typo. but
Chris
it-
Alms did not thoroughly, no, that's my fault, sorry.
I will see myself out.
Chris.
I'll escort you.
When we talk about facilities, the major project that, again, we've identified long-term is the siding and window replacement, door replacements. Currently, within our current funding, if things flush out the way we expect them to, we'd be looking at going to bid. We'll be presenting the board in September a presentation around that project that would address window siding at this campus, Ross, Sullivan, and Grodsky building. The MacArthur window replacement would have to wait, or window and siding replacement would be next in that priority list, but we would have to wait until that 2.3 million comes available in 2025, the fall of 2025, which means we're probably not looking at doing any of that work until summer of 26. So again, we continue to push that out longer. We know it's going to cost us more longer. The sooner and the earlier we can schedule work, the savings are what we're hoping to accomplish through a referendum. And then we have a number of other long-range facility plan projects that we've discussed outside of just the windows and siding. Early learning, this is our the biggest programmatic challenge for us. Currently, we have no plan or project, or I'm sorry, plan for underway for providing a full-day kindergarten or expanding a full-day kindergarten experience, again, for both space and staffing costs. We don't have that currently in our budget, so we have no current plans for enhancements to full-day kindergarten or early childhood. We will, though, obviously, need to start looking at a plan that says, okay, what if we're not able to have a successful referendum? How do we meet that mandate? And I've been very cautious in putting out the potential different options because I don't want to cry wolf and look like we're crying doomsday and then it doesn't come through to fruition, and then people say, see, you didn't really you said you were going to cut XYZ programs and then you didn't cut those. It's way too early for us to have that kind of public conversation. Similarly, there's still time, and we still have an opportunity for referendum campaign to bring in the funding that we would need to provide the additional classrooms and renovation at Eisenhower. So thinking of that perhaps as an intermediate step, our recommendation, as you've seen in the board packet and we're talking about tonight, would be for us to investigate what that would look like and to start the process of re-engaging the community. So when we think about these in terms of parallel timelines, we just tried to give and it's a better visual when you can line all three of them up over, so you can see the full 2 year or 2.5 year expanse. But generally speaking, we know what we have on the docket for us this year. We're looking at the windows and siding project that'll go to bid this fall. Again, we'll present that to the board next month. And then look to complete that work in summer of '24. If we were to engage the community in a referendum campaign, we have the next option or opportunity for us is the March referendum, the presidential primary. And in order to meet that deadline, we would need to start this fall refining the project, looking at tightening up our numbers, looking at our cost projections. We have to recost some of the work because, again, it was projected out for a certain construction timeline. So we've got to factor that in as well. We would need to take action as a board to put a referendum question on the ballot. We'd have to have that conversation in December. So we would, as we've done in the past, want to engage our community in some conversation around that and help folks understand why the need is there prior to the spring referendum. Should that be successful, we would be able to secure debt certificates following the referendum, and then we could expedite, and you see the bidding of the MacArthur windows and siding, the Ike renovations could start as, the bid for that could start as early as summer of '24. With the MacArthur project, if you're following that blue line, being completed in spring and summer of '25, so a year ahead of where we would be if we didn't have it. If we didn't have those bond proceeds, the fall through summer of '25 looks like very, very limited capital improvement projects for us because we've expended all of our current funding. We won't have any available till the fall. We also, though, in the fall of 2024, have another opportunity, the presidential election in November of 2024. So now you're talking about 3 parallel timelines, that if that were the opportunity, or should the spring referendum not be successful, we'd have another opportunity in November of 2024 to again look at the numbers, respond to the feedback from the community, and put a question on the ballot. We would need to do that somewhere in the early August timeframe, or in our August board meeting, if not July, to be on the November ballot in the fall of 2024. That then pushes out the Eisenhower construction from starting in winter of 2024 to starting in, on the next slide, the fall of 2025. So both of those two referendum options get us into, with successful referendums, would get us into a new facility in the 26-27 school year, so a year ahead of the mandate. It's most likely that if that March timeframe would be successful, that would be our optimal timeframe. It would match what we had talked about doing, just a bit delayed. The November opportunity, because it's 6 months later, you would have some spring construction. You'd have construction happening, some exterior construction happening over the winter, which is a factor in terms of cost, with a projected open in the spring of 2027. We might be able to expedite that work and open the classrooms in the fall of 2026, but that's too far out to really know. And again, on that top line, without that funding, it would be fall of 25 where we would sell those bonds. We would bid the work in winter of 26 for MacArthur, and we would then have the windows and siding project done at MacArthur in summer of 2026. So lots of what ifs and lots of potentials here. Really our, Christian, go to the one next slide. Really our main thought is to express to the community and also to understand what we need to put on our plate, that we will continue to plan and address immediate safety and maintenance needs given our current funding. We have to continue to do that because there is no guarantee of any additional funding coming, at least for the short term, within this next school year, into next summer. We want to focus our energy on what we believe some kind of an addition. Again, we would be looking at refining and recosting those proposals. We would bring some options to the board in September. Would give us an opportunity then to engage in October and have recommendations in November so that the board can deliberate and have a decision in December if we're going to pursue that March 2024 ballot timeframe. We think it's responsible to do both. We know that the costs are only going to continue to increase. We are fairly confident that the options that or the timeline that we've laid out is our best guess as to when and how we'd be able to tackle this. We just have to continue, I think, to do our due diligence. We've got to think about and address things in the immediate, while also continuing to be responsible and try to get to a solution that the community can support for our long-term needs.
Don, you, one of the further slides back, it showed that we couldn't afford to do all the safety enhancements like the doorways and such. So I didn't see those laid out on your little pathway arrows. So do
in terms of the if we needed to do, if we got referendum funding.
So if we passed a referendum, part of the funds would be used to secure our entryways.
Right.
So those weren't really laid out in the arrows. So does that happen like when we do the Eisenhower work?
Yes.
When we do the MacArthur
Sorry.
work?
Yes, that's part of that referendum package of work.
Okay.
And I don't want anyone watching thinking we don't have secure vestibules or secure doorways.
Understood.
But as they're prioritized right now, we're repairing, we're replacing individual parts, and that kind of labor-intensive safety response is what we have to do right now, but isn't the most cost-effective way. So I don't want anybody to think that we've got these safety needs. We're addressing them as best we can with our current funding. But yes, that's part of the reason why the Eisenhower or the MacArthur windows, siding, doors would be able to be moved up, because we would pay for that out of referendum funding to expedite that and to reduce costs, because we're doing it a year earlier. And that would include, at MacArthur, there's full door replacement as part of that bid that we looked at through that safety lens. Yeah, sorry, I only called it Ike construction, but it's all of those other referendum related projects. Good catch, thank you.
All right, so I'll say something. So
Go ahead,
I'm the pessimistic person in the group.
Yes.
So what happens if the referendums don't pass?
Right.
So when do you start planning what those options are? Because it would be really interesting to know what other plans we would potentially have.
Yes.
And what those costs are.
Yes.
And I think it would only be fair to the community to understand what those costs are versus construction costs.
Right.
I mean, it's thrust upon us. So if we had to do it next year, there would be a completely different plan, because we wouldn't be able to build anything.
Right.
Other than, okay, let's go submit our waiver so that we have until 30.
We can kick it down the road. Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be my first suggestion is
Yeah.
let's fill out that waiver form, even if it's not even out there yet. Let's create our own and send it in.
Right.
But the other part is,
Oh, it's true.
you know, what are the other options other than the construction and a referendum?
Right.
Because I
So-
look at the worst case scenario and say, all right, so what are we going to do?
And so my thought on that is that we need to be careful not to throw out specifics without having really researched that, because people will run with it and
I agree.
go to some assumptions. The answer is it won't necessarily cost more in dollars, because we're not getting any more dollars in. What it'll cost is in program and service cuts. So if we have to prioritize full-day kindergarten, and we have to have 6 more teachers going into teaching full-day K, and what else?
But if you had another option that wasn't construction completely, you could potentially go for another referendum that is a lower cost referendum.
Yes, and that we would, right now, there is no such other funding option.
No, I
But
agree.
yes, if that were to come to light, we would absolutely revisit the plan, find out what we can utilize in grant funding and how that would impact what our total dollar ask will be.
Just to kind of follow up on Jim's question, right? That if we bring this to referendum again, I think that what Jim's asking has to be part of the message of the community, right? Which is to say that we need to provide full-day kindergarten in 27-28, and if this doesn't pass, right, we're asking for this money now so that we don't have to cut programs,
Right.
in order to provide that. Like, that has to be part of the message, don't you think?
I think it has to be part of the message when our back is up against that wall. And our back will not be up against that wall in March of 2024. Our back will be up against that wall in November of 2024. And so I think we need to be, for me, it's, we don't want to falsely, and I know I'm suggesting that, but we need to be able to say, look, if this doesn't happen, the XYZ cuts are going to need to be made in order for us to provide that.
Right, but I think you're giving them only one option. You're giving them some revised or some refined version of our current plan versus another. We had one plan. We didn't have a plan A and a plan B. And the plan B might not be very palatable to a lot of people, but I could have come up with a plan B that threw trailers down
I was
there.
just supposed to say, we'd throw
trailers
over
like we
there.
did in in Catholic schools 25 years ago.
Right.
That had air conditioning units, and you walked into the building to go to the restroom, which is really not what you want. But you know what? You could do it from a cheaper perspective, and sit there and go, okay, well, you know what? You don't want the buildings, then we're either going to go rent space somewhere, we're going to put trailers up, or we're going to do something else. And I think the community would probably be interested in understanding some of that other option stuff than just a revised version of it, where I could see some districts probably going to filing a lawsuit against the governor right now, saying that I'm not gonna, we can't do it. Right. I mean, so that's where I'm coming from.
And yes, I mean the short answer is we don't know what that referendum question might look like, or what options or what that campaign might look like, because we just need to resurrect the process and start again where we were a year ago.
And I guess what I'm saying is I'm concerned about just looking at the construction plans that we had, and I would like, if we're going to resurrect a referendum, I would like more options potentially to be discussed, so that people say, well, I can live with that, I can't live with that, or I can go rent space at some empty Randhurst, even though it's Mount Prospect, and say, all right, this is our kindergarten space, and we have buses going there. I'm just
right. We wouldn't limit ourselves just to what we had, but I think our responsibility is still to put forth the recommendation for what we believe is the best interest of the community. And at this time, I wouldn't say trailers, although they could be effective. I wouldn't. That's where I'm saying I don't want to put things out there that are not in our best interest, not in the long-term best interest of the district, just to meet a projected timeline when we still are in the task force is going to finish their recommendations. The timeline may get modified, so there's still some other what ifs. What hasn't changed is the need and the solution that we identified being what we felt was in the best interest of the district long term and in of our students and community.
Jim, I hear what you're saying, right? I think that the what if game becomes like, well, okay, I'll vote for the referendum if, it gets too muddy if we start doing too many different options. I think that, and I agree, right? I think there aren't other options out there. But I think that, to Don's point or whatever, March, let's try and see where we're at. Then November we come back with these, one that we're, I don't know. I just think when you get too many out, it's like a little kid in a candy shop. Well, I want this one, and then you're going to be like, well, I want this one, and then you're going to have...
I wouldn't, oh, please go.
The factor that will be, that it has been added that wasn't present before is the fact that
Now
it's
it's mandatory.
required. I mean, this isn't something that, yes, we believe it's in the best interest of our students, but it's required. So I think that changes things because, we have to do it whenever that is, with the extensions and that kind of stuff. So if we don't pass a referendum to allow that, something else has to go. So I don't know that we necessarily have to say, this is plan A, plan B. I think we make it obvious that if we don't do it, or if the referendum doesn't pass and we don't have the funds to do it, we have to get them from someplace else.
No, I don't disagree with you on that.
And so that could be a pretty severe
And I
thing.
think that, to me, that's when you start discussing how you do it, whether that's trailers and whatnot. I don't think trailers should factor into a referendum plan, but a reduced, possibly some of the things that we were talking about in the referendum, maybe that's reduced in a different referendum plan. But I wouldn't jump to cutting corners until you don't have a referendum and still have to meet those requirements. Then instead of cutting, curriculum, then you talk about doing things differently. I mean, I would hate to give our constituents a referendum plan that included things that weren't optimal for our students. And I don't know if that's what you're suggesting. I apologize if you meant, but I just.
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just trying to understand what we're thinking about, what
Right.
our thought process is in this, because at some point, you may need to. I said,
Yeah.
I'm the pessimistic
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
If the
I don't
referendums don't
disagree
pass,
with you on
Yeah.
that at all.
Right.
you need to understand
You need to
what
lay out
your-
all your cards and say.
you need to understand what your plan is, because,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it.
Yes.
you-
For
you-
if it doesn't go through, yes. I agree.
So to that question specifically, my thinking is we'll spend our time and energy as we did last time putting forth our best rationale why the solution that we feel is best and put it out to the community again. We need to engage the community in that this fall, and that's going to require some cutting, and we heard some messages that we need to maybe refine. But developing that whole alternate reality plan, I wouldn't jump into until we see what happens in March. Because again, our back isn't in a place just yet where we need to make those cuts. But we need to be ready to start developing that, because then our backs will be up against it in November. And then if that referendum were unsuccessful, it would have to be then that we would put into place those changes or cuts or modifications to the plan.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I think the recommendation right now is to re-engage our partners and begin to take a look at some of the numbers and the options and kind of have the ducks in the row to have a further conversation. We just wanted to make sure that something that the board would be supportive of us doing,
Yeah,
that
the
re-engagement.
partners not being the ones who helped us.
Our community partners.
We're talking about architects and stuff like that.
Right,
Right,
that's correct. Yeah,
Not,
right.
not,
Yeah,
not the
consultant.
for-fee consultants.
No.
No, no, because we did our research through them, and it was important to do to gather that feedback, and they facilitated the community forums and some of that other information gathering. But we feel pretty good about the data that we currently have. It's
Yeah.
right on the heels of last spring, so demographics haven't shifted crazy, and people's perspectives haven't necessarily shifted crazy in that short time frame.
Agreed. Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
The remaining items are just information for your consideration. Dr. Curtis, can you just give a brief overview of what was in your memo?
Sure. The first one is the curriculum and instruction memo. This is the annual update on our curriculum throughout the district. You'll notice that all of our curriculum is listed there by grade level. A couple of notes for that. Our social studies curriculum has been updated based on board approval last spring with that adoption. Also, you'll notice that the years approved are listed there. And for this year, our big push is going to be a committee that we have for science adoption, which is up for review this year. So those are probably the highlights of the plan.
And then the other memo is relative to our professional development plan.
Yes, and that memo includes our professional development goals, calendar and schedule, and overall district themes that are included, and all of our committee work that will be done this year in the district. There's also a link for the complete plan at the bottom if you want to check that out.
We'll be sharing that with staff on Monday at our Institute Day.
I can't believe that Mystery Science is up for review already.
It's been 7 years.
That was right when I got here,
Right.
that they had.
Right.
And they seem to like it, so
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's gonna be tougher to unseat that. I think.
maybe
Yeah.
around
Not,
a little
yeah.
longer, yeah.
I also share, as I typically do, throughout the summer, and then we'll do our 10-day enrollment report in September. But just an update on where we're at with current enrollment numbers. Feel pretty good about where we're at. We had projected that 4th grade. We looked at the number that came out of forecast 5 and thought, it looks a little low, and anticipated that. That's why we brought that additional 4th grade section back. So, and then it did prove to be at 107% of what was projected. Similarly, 1st grade, we did not make any cuts in 1st grade, knowing that that number looked a little light as well, and we never quite know post-COVID our kindergartners are going to come back to us in 1st grade. And so that one is at 108% of where it was projected, but we kept all those sections, so we're going to be just fine. Similarly, in 3rd grade, we kept all of our sections. So I looked at the numbers thanks to Vanessa, who updated this again today, and our overall percent of projected is at 102. So just slightly over the 101.5.
No hot spots with
No hot spots. And we're not recommending any additional changes to the staffing plan or anything like that.
The 6th grade class is so small, and they had 0 change.
Yes, right. Yeah, 137 projected, 137 enrolled.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's a tiny little group too.
Yeah. The next is just, again, another information item. We're going to be presenting this to staff on Monday. As the board's aware, we engaged with a a third-party consultant. Joe Crimmins is a retired officer and detective out of Hoffman Estates, and now does consulting on school safety, and he helped us to revise our emergency procedures, documentations, and our flip charts. We will also be engaged with Joe throughout this year for continued training. So we're excited about those enhancements and improvements as well.
This is awesome.
And lastly, the strategic plan goals. We just, again, we'll be presenting this to the staff on Monday, so I wanted to bring it to the board first. As you know, we redid our entire strategic plan last year, and then over the summer, in the spring and summer, we refined that just to, so what's on the plate for this year. And so we've narrowed down our objectives to 5 bullet points in each, so that we're really focused and targeted on what we have prioritized for the year. And so those are have been shared with you as well.
Can I ask just one question about the like the emergency stuff, and then this was something that was discussed in the security committee meeting. Like it feels like that there was a lot of really good work that was done over the summer, right, for revamping the procedures, for training, right, for escalation training for different groups of staff. Some of the the changes to some of those to some of the new windows. I get this how can we help kind of communicate that to the community, right? To say like, here's, we did a lot of work, right? That we're, that just, setting aside the referendum, like that we are constantly thinking about security,
right.
And here's kind of here's a summary of a lot of the work that we've done over the last, between the school year, to really improve and revamp things in the district.
So one way will come out tomorrow in our school scene, when we do kind of the recap of what was discussed what was discussed at the board meeting.
Okay.
And so we'll use that as an opportunity not to get into specifics of the emergency plan, but to share the safety enhancements and upgrades that we worked on, both the physical plant kinds of changes as well as some of the procedures.
Okay.
That booklet's awesome.
That is.
Thank you, Michelle.
Seriously.
You're welcome. Do you have this at your school district? Because we have all the park districts.
I'll sell it to you.
I was gonna say, well, it's intellectual property, so just don't forget that.
I actually don't know yet.
No, yeah, you do. I'm sure you do. Every school district had the flip charts.
Yeah, they all, the park districts have.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
We might.
Oh. Oh.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to old business.
Oh, Don and I had some fun.
Last month we had appointed Becky. In her absence, we appointed Becky as the
That was awesome.
reviewer of the minutes.
Congratulations on that assignment.
We met, and what'd you think?
It was great. I learned a lot. It was amazing. It was wonderful. I enjoyed my time.
Were there any
meetings?
meeting things that you hadn't seen? So this was stuff that possibly you hadn't.
No, this
No,
is just these were
6 months,
It's only 6 months.
semi. Yep.
yeah. So I've been on the board. I just put in secretary. So I've seen. Yes, it was good. So
Motion.
yeah, I move to release the executive session minutes as recommended.
I'll second.
Mr.
Roll
Bednar?
call.
Yes.
Mr. Godanis?
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney?
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark?
Yes.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Botwinski?
Yes.
Mr. Novak?
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. All right. New business.
So as Becky mentioned earlier, our policy committee did meet. We reviewed press policy volume 112. These are all going to be recommended as presented, or adopt as presented, but they're presented tonight just for your first read. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to meet with you or walk you through all the footnote changes.
All right. Motion, let's see, do we have a motion to adjourn to executive session? There will be no action items after executive session.
I move to adjourn to executive session to discuss personnel and negotiations.
A second.
Motion by Becky and seconded by Mary Lynn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bednar?
Yes.
Mr. Godanis?
Yes.
Mrs. McLeany?
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark?
Yes.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Speltwinski?
Yes.
Mr. Novak?
And yes. Motion carries 7-0. We are adjourned.
8:35.